I think there's proof positive, and it's recent, that what you do can be maximally effective. And I'll cite to a meeting I had with the president of the Roosevelt Room in November of last year. I was there ostensibly to be thanked for my work on the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Agreement with the P5+1 in Iran. But the president waxed eloquent for about 30 minutes. John Kerry sitting right by his side. And here I am, I've been there, I know how these people do things. I'm saying to myself, is he talking to his Secretary of State? Is he talking to us? Is he talking to himself? And I quickly concluded all three. And if you quote this anywhere, I'll deny it. It was non-attribution. But the president's first words in his very eloquent disposition were, quote, "There is a bias in this town towards war." Unquote.
Say that again.
There is a bias in this town towards war. I wanted to leap across the table and kiss him. That's what I teased. You're right, Mr. President. It took you 7 years to figure that out, but you're right. There is a playbook in Washington for war. Period. It's supported by trillions of dollars of weapon sales. We are the biggest death merchant on the face of the earth. Lockheed Martin is the site-bearing leader of that. We sell more weapons. We sold $40 billion worth of small arms to the world in a counterterrorism effort during the GWAT, the Global War on Terror. And we don't even know where those arms are, and I will tell you, many of them are being used against our own Marines and soldiers by groups like ISIS, Al-Qaeda, the Al-Nusra Front, and so forth. That's how incredibly incompetent we are, and how much we're influenced by these power centers of wealth and more. The other thing the president said that struck me, and I have had this from congressmen too, with regard to the legislative act, I think it's accurate. The reason that he really didn't act when Bashar al-Assad supposedly used chemical weapons, the intelligence there was sketchy too, but that was a red line. And the reason the Congress didn't push him back was because they had not seen the cards, letters, emails, and telephone calls of such a volume in their lifetime. The White House or the Congress. From the American people, essentially saying, you put major ground forces in Syria and we will unelect you. That's essentially what happened. That shows you the power of you and your colleagues in this country acting in concert. You just have to do it.
Thank you. So we have time for a few questions. If you have a question, please raise your hand. And when I call on you, state your name and just project loudly, please. We're going to try to do this without microphones. Yes, state your name, please.
My name is Alexandra Dixon. I'm from Fairfax, Virginia, and my question is for you. You mentioned that the ACLU is filing a FOIA request to get the torture report out. That was my understanding. What can we as citizens do to support the ACLU in their FOIA request?
It's actually, we already filed it, and it's a lawsuit now. And that lawsuit is helping to prevent that report from getting clawed back from whence it came. You can certainly be in touch with legislators, we can, I think particularly now with the transition, imminent transition, it would help if Senator Burr heard about it now, and if he's still in office after November, heard about it again and again and again. Those who are on the Senate Select Committee, I think, need to hear just how important it is, and hear your voices out clearly. The first thing that could be done. So I would suggest contacting those senators and your own, so that they can levy pressure as well.
Thank you. Anne-Marie.
My name is Anne-Marie McCartney. I'd like to ask the Colonel what the name of the lawsuit is and the captain who is suing the guests about our activity in this area.
I'll give you my card. Ask me, please, remind me, and I'll email you the information.
Or maybe just, it can be posted on whatever you're sending people.
Okay.
So Adrian,
I may have it on my phone. If I do, I'll give it to you right here. I'll cite you the court case. The problem is it's the U.S. Federal District Court in Washington, and that's the one that more often than not only sides with national security, which is what all our Article 3 courts have a penchant to do, but it also decides in a way that precludes any further legal action, to include appealing it to the Supreme Court. That's what worries me about it.
Yeah.
Stephen Van Deer from Fairfax County, Virginia. I'm not positive this question is appropriate, but it does deal with, let's call it, well, it deals with killing in this country. There are gun control advocates who are asking that the terror loophole be closed by using the watch list or the terror list to control access to guns. I have refused to sign such petitions because I don't understand whether there is a difference between the terror suspect list and the no-fly list, and whether denying access to guns to suspected terrorists would in fact deny access to guns to many people who are not.
Who would like to answer?
I can answer that quickly. I understand. This is a tough issue. And I want to be clear, the ACLU's position is that there's no constitutional bar to reasonable regulation of guns, Second Amendment notwithstanding. If you're going to regulate access to guns, you can't do it in an arbitrary or discriminatory way. So our position, we have major objections to the watch listing system and the way it's formulated. And if you're going to use that, you're incorporating all the arbitrariness and the discrimination that's baked into the watch listing system. And you're going to do that with regard to denying gun purchases. That doesn't mean that there aren't completely valid, neutral ways of regulating access to guns. And I think that most of the ACLU would acknowledge that. I think there's been, there tends to be the criticism of the ACLU that it doesn't focus on the Second Amendment. How does an ACLU lawyer count to 10, 1, 3, 4, 5? NRA has that one pretty well covered. But it is in the Constitution. You just can't do it in a way that is unfair and arbitrary.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Ruth Hall. I'm on the new to the ACLU Board of Virginia, and I spent 23 years at the State Department, and I've been fascinated by what I would call tribal hatred and these sort of fear-based excesses. There's been a lot on the internment of the Japanese Americans. George Takai spoke at the State Department. I think he has 7 million Facebook followers. And about how we've had these excesses in our country, but also around the world. Well-educated Indians, when I served in India, you mentioned the P word, Pakistan, and you watch their faces change and this fear-based hatred come over them. And you read, or I'm in Indonesia, and you talk to a Japanese Indonesian, and then you mention a Chinese Indonesian, and the same thing. Their faces change, and this fear-based irrationality overwhelms them. Daniel Goleman talked about this as an amygdala hijacking, where the primitive part of the brain, the fear-based tribal, seeing the other as a threat, seeing that person of another color or who's different from you or a different background, that there's a fear-based thing that takes over the rational mind. So all the education shuts down, everything shuts down. And you're seeing some of this in our current political discourse. So maybe Kate, maybe someone else, how do we overcome through education, through training, through whatever, how do we overcome the amygdala hijacking? How do we overcome the fear-based excesses that do not respond to rational discourse?
Wow, that's a good question. Yeah. So I think what Hugh was saying about how we have to make these personal connections, I mean, that really is the only way out of that. And that's something for us all to do. And it's something, I think what I want to highlight is to remember about our members of Congress, to remember about lawmakers and policymakers, that they are just as human and they have those exact same impulses. And so, and you can imagine, you know, on the Hill, that there is a very disproportionate looking and sounding makeup of the people who visit these congressional offices on a routine basis. So that's why, I mean, I would just stress how important it is to bring the diversity of America to the Hill, to meet with lawmakers individually, and to do that, on a regular basis, and encourage others to come to BC, to come often, and then bring friends and bring people who are from diverse backgrounds. I think that's going to be crucial. I know it's a big topic you raised, but so maybe do others want to add anything to that? I mean, I think clearly we all have to do this in our in every aspect of our personal lives, and also think about the political issues, because then when it's bigotry is of course horrible anywhere, and then when there are when those same kinds of impulses are at the table, and people are making war and peace, life and death decisions when they're elected, then it has even greater implications for the whole world. So just to stress that that's the responsibility we all have to get involved in our democracy.
Sir. Oh, I'm sorry. I was thinking, you may be next. Sir, yes.
I'm Roy Sheriff. I've been a member of the ACLU since the 60s. And I'm probably one of the few people here who has a concealed carry permit, which is relevant because of your question on the denying guns to people on the watch list. That is one of the things one of the things I like about that suggestion. One of the very few things. I have attended meetings of Second Amendment supporters, Virginia Citizens Defense League and such. And as a generalization, and we know that no generalization is worth a damn, including that one. But as a generalization, Second Amendment people tend to be non-progressive, shall we say. But they are united with the ACLU, even though many of them might not admit it, in opposing that particular provision on due process grounds. You can get on one of those watch lists, not know that you're on it, and once you are on it, it's damn near impossible to get off of it. So
You have a question?
that ties into another thing. Try to be understanding of the other guy's point of view, because that way you can communicate better.
Thank you. Scott.
I'm Scott Price, I'm with the Alliance for Progressive Virginia. I was hoping the panel could speak generally to something that hasn't come up yet, which is the role of media in this. Since 9/11, we've seen a very much cheerleadery media that is very interested in projecting these ideas of constant danger, and at the local level, you get the sort of if it bleeds, it leads. We know that local media tends to focus on African American crime, and I was just wondering if you could speak to that, because that to me is at least part of this issue.
couldn't recall when I was doing my notes for this presentation, but right back when the Patriot Act was passed, there's something in it that inhibits investigative journalism. And I mentioned that on a panel of about 20 people a few days after that was passed. And that was a local newspaper publisher on the same panel. The local newspaper publisher was not.
I think you're just
Oh, okay, is that better?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think from a specific thing, from the Patriot Act, I think that, I can't remember what the provision was at the time, but only two of us mentioned it that night, it was myself and the newspaper publisher. And then, from then on, I was a favorite of his and got things published in the paper because I argued the validity of their work. So I think we can get, from that limited perspective, we can get newspapers kind of on our side. But newspapers have even greater problem than that, and the media and television too, because they try to, we need to attack the following thing they do, which is to say, if we have a person who's on the left of center on this side, we have a person right of center on this side, we have done fair and balanced presentation from the news. For example, in the 1990s, they did this by calling Patrick Buchanan a conservative. No, he's not. That if you have a liberal on one side and Patrick Buchanan on the other side, that's unbalanced because he's not a conservative. He's some radical person. They made him acceptable. So we have, I think we need to push them, not sit back and just take a look.
Another thing that we can do to push them is to write letters to the editor. I know that many of you do, and would encourage more of it. I mean, that still today, for most newspapers, the most well-read section of the newspaper is the letter to the editor section. And I think another difference from progressives and others is I often, from my anecdotal experience, it seems like progressives seem to think they need to be a complete expert on the subject before they write about it, before they talk about it, and that's something that others have figured out that that's not the case. But what I mean by that is that all of us are experts on something. We're experts on our own experience, and we can talk about from that, and we can also overcome these sorts of tribal impulses that we have as human beings to try to stereotype people and look and talk about our own experiences and educate others about those. The experience of being at this conference, it would be, I'm sure, others would agree. I mean, it would be great to see letters to the editor about your experience at this conference, or something to talk to AJ or Dr. Arpak and ACLU Virginia about, or other kinds of experiences you have in the community, the experiences of that we talked about today, of where you were in 9/11 and what you've seen since and what you want changed. And I would just also add that we hear from congressional offices, I've heard from members of Congress all the time that they do read those letters to the editor, that every day, when I remember when I was interning on the Hill years ago, that we would have to put together first thing in the morning press clips and look at any press mention, and even if it's for a small town newspaper of serving a few thousand people in some random county in Oregon, that we put it together and put it in for the senator to see. They want to see that. They know that people who write letters are very likely to vote and also encourage other people to vote, are very engaged. So those really count. Those can go a long way.
Two more questions. Sir in the plaid in the back.
Hi, my name is Kate Walters. I'm an attorney. When I read the authorization for the use of military force, I see a necessary nexus to 9/11. And I think the OLC disagrees with my reading of that, so I would invite comment on the way administration lawyers have enabled this sort of endless war that we're talking about.
The word of the AUMF is specifically tied to preventing the actors who caused 9/11, and yet it's been used to permit sort of a legal blank check on a broader war on terror. Colonel Lewis, thank you for guiding.
Of course, what I saw in the Bush administration's first 4 years was an aberration, I hope. led by David Addington, who was counsel to the vice president, but who really was the lawyer in the administration. Alberto Gonzalez cowered before David. Douglas Fyde, Bill Haynes, OSD, Office of Secretary of Defense, General Counsel. They cowered before David, or they were colleagues in evil. John Yoo, Jay Bybee at OLC, and so forth. The ones who crafted the chapeau of law over torture. This is becoming increasingly a phenomenon no longer. That is to say, it's occurring time and time again that, as we say in the military, you have two kinds of lawyers. You have one who comes in and asks you as the commander, what do you want to do? I'll tell you if it's legal. And then you have the other kind who comes in and says, what do you want to do? I'll make it legal. That is becoming the kind of lawyer, both in the Justice Department, which has just demoralized that department majorly, in my view, and a lot of people have left because of it. But it's serving the national security state. Anything done for the national security state, and the judger of that is the NSC staff or the NSC itself, with the president sitting, is good. Anything that hurts the national security state is bad. And that's just a bastardization of the rule of law that leads me to use that too as an identifier for a liberal democracy. You're not a constitutional liberal democracy if the rule of law is not keeping men from hurting others on a regular basis. And when Adams was the one, I think, who said men were angels, you wouldn't need law. Well, men aren't angels, and women aren't either. I can testify to that. There are no angels in the United States government, myself included. So if you don't have the rule of law to at least give you an imperfect at best, but nonetheless a check on power, you don't have anything. And we've lost that because law increasingly corresponds to the exercise of that power.
Last quick question, Marty.
Yeah, I'm a psychologist and member of Richmond with Peace, Israel, and Palestine. I have a quick comment about the amygdala woman raised the issue of
Repeat your name.
Marty Ween. The amygdala, we all have these strong feelings and are very hardwired. And I spend a lot of time in psychotherapy identifying clients' negative thoughts and helping them to counter them, to argue very vigorously. Sometimes they can do it on their own. Sometimes they're unaware of what their irrational beliefs are. So we have to do that in our society has many irrational beliefs about black people, about Muslims, about Palestinians, about anyone who's very different from ourselves. My question is Israel committing genocide against Palestinians with $3 to $5 billion and how promising $38 billion over the next 10 years?
You'll certainly get me to answer that question. I think one of the most dangerous things in terms of national security that this republic has done in a long time is disregard completely Washington's admonishment about making another nation's interest yours. We have made Israel's interest absolutely congruent with ours. And it is going to lead both of us, Tel Aviv, Israel, and Washington, the United States, into hell. The relationship has become one where we turn a blind eye, we still keep the rhetoric up, to apartheid in the West Bank. Yes, that is what is in the West Bank, apartheid. Apartheid enforced increasingly by the IDF, whose best officers hate it and don't want to be doing it because it contaminates a very good military. We have apartheid in Jerusalem, and we're working hard on apartheid in Israel proper. We have a one-state solution staring us in the face. That one state will become, over the next 20 years, an apartheid state par excellence, just like South Africa was. The international community will condemn it, and I'll make a prediction up here. In 25 years, there will be no Israel. I'm echoing some Arabs who said that for other reasons. I'm saying it because I'm a military professional and I see where the wind is blowing with regard to Israel's security. People like Bibi Netanyahu are dangerous for Israel's security. They're dangerous for Israel's long-term security. He stood on the Golan Heights recently and said they're ours forever now. Watching the turmoil in Syria, probably excited about it, and saying they can't attack me if they're fighting each other. That's Netanyahu and Avigdor Lieberman and Zippy Livni's and other people's appreciation. They're in control of Israel now. And Herzog is not going to change that even if he's elected and throws Bibi out. They're in control. And they want a greater Israel. They want Jordan. They want the West Bank. They want a greater Israel, and they're willing to do whatever it takes to include sacrifice the security of their state to do it.
I would add, so where it was asked about whether what Israel's doing is genocide, and the way that genocide is generally used, of course, in the U.S. is the most common way that it's been referred to is to refer to historical precedents like the Nazi genocide of Jews and others, and saying things we all know. But so Palestinians are not being wiped out. That is why they are there, still there. What is happening is that.
Can you repeat that comment, please? I didn't quite understand what she just said about who's not being wiped out.
Palestinians. Palestinians are not being entirely wiped out.
Oh, now it's entirely wiped out.
Okay. So, what is happening? The military occupation of Palestinians is absolutely abhorrent, and certainly as American taxpayers that's subsidizing this, I think we all have a responsibility to speak out about it, and would encourage you to do so. And what I hear from members of Congress all the time on this issue is that, of course, there are very few who do speak out about it, and those who do are saying that even when they do, they don't hear from their constituents about it enough. They hear from the opposition.